right, so retargeting, we're going to retarget a Ready Player Me character in Motion Builder. We're going to use Ready Player Me website. We're going to use Blender. We're going to use Motion Builder. We're going to use the website Mixamo, and we're going to use Unreal Engine. So we're using, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6 different programs here or websites to make all this happen. In addition, eventually you'll be using Motive as well once you start recording motion capture. So a lot of stuff going on. So I'll try to go slow, and definitely let me know if you have a question about something. Okay. Also, it's a live demo, so the potential for failure is enormous. So bear with me. First thing I'm going to do is get a character. Again, we're using Ready Player Me because they're simple avatars. Just because we're using Ready Player Me, what we're doing can work on any character that you get from anywhere. So I'm going to get my face mask guy again. The downside about Ready Player Me is that it exports the GLB format, so we kind of have to do an extra step, but that's all right. We'll go through it, just like we did last week. Download avatar GLB. I'm going to save this, make a new folder. I'll just call this today's date. And I'll just name this RPM underscore. I'll call this raw underscore Feb 23rd. You can call it whatever you want, but since we have a lot of files, I'm just naming them per each step. Okay. And save. All right. File saved. Now I'm going to go to Blender. Again, if you Blender does not pop up in the start button on these computers, so there's a shortcut on your desktop for Blender. If there isn't a shortcut, you're going to have to go into Explorer. I think the programs are on the E drive in here. Windows Explorer, My PC, E drive, Blender Foundation or Blender 4.0, whatever the folder is called, and you could start Blender up from there. Okay. New project in Blender. I'm going to get rid of all this garbage that I don't need. And I'm going to import the GLB file. File, import, GLB import, GLTF 2.0. I'm now going to browse to the folder that I made and import that GLB file. All we're using Blender to do is convert Ready Player Me's GLBs to FBX. If you're not using a GLB file and your model is already in FBX, great. You don't even have to use Blender at all. Now, this is where a lot of you had joint issues. Let's just go ahead and delete the entire armature by selecting on it and just hit delete. If you want to make sure that it's deleted, you can go into wireframe mode in Blender, the one to the left of the blue selected one up there. And then you can see the joint system in here, right? So if I select the armature and hit delete, now it's all gone. Also, delete that icosphere thing if you have that. The other one was really small, so maybe there was a download problem. Okay, so this character right now is in a pose called an A pose. In motion capture, we talk about A poses and T poses. These are starting poses for doing motion capture animation. They are kind of predefined poses that are easy for people to do, relatively the same, regardless of if you're short, small, big, or tall. Everybody can do the same pose. I like having you do a T pose rather than an A pose because there's less ambiguity about it. A pose, this. T pose is more straight, right? Not good. Straight. This pose is important because when we do the process of retargeting, just taking data from one animation and applying it to a different animation, we need to match these things up. So when we synchronize them, if one character is in a basketball pose and the other character is in an A pose, when we synchronize them, you're essentially saying that this A pose is the same as this pose, and you're going to get very weird results. So when we synchronize them together, we need both animations to be either in a T pose or an A pose. Really, the animation doesn't matter, but A pose and T pose are the easiest to set up. So I like the T pose, so we're going to need to put this character into a T pose. So all right, I deleted the armature, the rig. I didn't have the icosphere problem that y'all did, but make sure you delete that. And let's export, file, export, FBX. I'm going to dump everything into that same folder. Call this RPM. Let's call it Blender, Feb 23rd. Now in Blender, I'm going to tell you this just because it's useful to know, but unfortunately this is a Ready Player Me bug that textures are all going to be messed up anyways, which we talked about a lot last week. But if we don't do this, no textures will export. Even if we do it, the textures are going to all be screwed up. But in that path mode right there, if we change that from auto to copy, and then we click the little box to the right of that, this will allow us to actually export the textures and bake them into the FBX file. Fortunately, we're dealing with that Ready Player Me bug, but this is just a Blender 101 thing. Exporting. And export. Cool. So we made a character, we brought it into Blender as a GLB file, we stripped out the armature or the rig, and we now exported it as an FBX file. I'm going to jump over to Mixamo. And upload my character. And because we stripped out the armature or the rig, we will have to reset that back up using the auto rigger in Mixamo. Just letting it process. Looks like it worked. Click next, set my chin, set my wrists, elbows, knees. All right, while this is processing, I want to remind you, whoever you decide in your little group that you want to suit up in the motion capture suit for next week, um, make sure that person that is doing the performance, and no pressure, it's not a big huge performance that you really need to worry too much about. Although we are recording data, so if there's something that you want to record because you know the world that you're going to make, you should think about that and talk about that with your group a little bit. But my point is that person doing the performance, try not to wear anything super baggy, clothing wise, that day. Also, just sneakers are good. No like reflective air bubbles in in the heels of your shoes and the soles of your shoes. Uh, Not a lot of bulky jewelry or anything like that. Also, if you have long hair, you bringing a scrunchie or a hair tie or something to put your hair up. We'll need to do that. Then we can suit up in the really attractive motion capture suits. It'll be great. All right, looks like my character is rigged here. Seems like the results are pretty good. The auto rigger does a great job for the most part. I've used it a lot. Okay, so I'm not using any Mixamo animation or anything, so I'm not even going to look at these animations. I'm just going to click the download button. We use Blender just to turn the GLB file into an FBX. We use Mixamo just to give our model a rig and a T-pose. I don't even need to select the T-pose animation. I can just click download, and then it's right here. It says, do you want to download in T-pose or the original pose? I want T-pose. When we do our motion capture recording, we'll talk about this more next week, but we want to start our recordings in a T-pose, go and do our animation, and then come back and end our animation in a T-pose too. Typically, when recording motion capture, that's done. All right, I'm going to save this. T-pose. Just going to call this one the Mixamo file. Okay, that is saved. Everyone with me so far? know how to change Blender's navigations to get out of Blender. Everybody else all right? You're taking it from Blender over and mine will be here. Oh, you mean textures. Sure. So let's go through those sucks. But also, well, no, you don't even get to see that when you export from Blender. Now when you export, you'll get textures, but they're going to be all in one spot. Okay. Which is why we import the GLB in Unreal first to get all the materials. Did we do that this time too? No. Okay. You yeah. Move closer. Yeah, it's the same thing. And you don't need this. You have to change your windows. Yeah. What? Sure. Everybody else good? All right. This video is going to have big gaps of me walking away. All right, open up Motion Builder, which should be on all of these computers. Yep, Motion Builder is a very deep program. It is PC only. And you can get Motion Builder for free with the educational license through Autodesk if you want to get it on your own computer. But it's not going to work on your Mac. Motion Builder, like I said, is a very deep program. We are scratching the surface of that today. Okay, so when you first load up Motion Builder, it's probably going to, I don't see it because I've already opened this before, but it's probably going to give you like a general welcome screen. And it might also give you a prompt that says, do you want to change your controls? If you don't see that, you can get it back by going to Settings, Interaction Mode. What I'm talking about is this little pop-up. It's in Settings, Interaction Mode if you didn't see that pop up and you want to get it back. This is personal preference. You can change the navigation to what you're more comfortable with. For me, that's Maya. I like to use the Alt button. That's what I will be using for class. So unless you're comfortable, I suggest you change it to Maya. So we're talking about the same thing. Okay. Settings, interaction mode. That's what I did. It's supposed to prompt you when you first open the software, but maybe it's been opened before in this class. All right. Otherwise, Alt left click allows me to orbit around. Alt right click allows me to zoom in and out. Alt middle mouse button allows me to pan. Scroll wheel allows me to zoom in and out as well. It's a grid. You ever used a 3D program before? This is the same general idea. Let's go ahead and import our Blender character. So we go to File, Open. Notice there's a lot of different ways to open things here. We have Open, we have Merge, we have Motion File Imports, we have numerous other imports. We are opening our file to start with. So File, Open. And then go browse to wherever you save that. This is the one that I T-posed from Mixamo. You will get a window that looks like this when you open something. This is essentially open options that allows us to choose what we want to import. In our case, there's only one mesh here and one animation. So if you had multiple animations, you would see a lot of different stuff here, because we could bake multiple takes of animation into one file. But in this case, it's just one-to-one. So just go ahead and click open at the bottom. And then you should see your character open up. Not only do you see your character, but you should also see the skeleton, the joint system, in a T-pose. What's the problem? I'm going to Google it. All right, somebody remind me to start. We are now back to recording. Everybody has fuzzy viewports now. So we imported our character into Motion Builder. Navigation, Alt left click, Alt right click, Alt middle mouse button allows us to do all those things. So a little tour of Motion Builder here. We have our main viewport up top. We have a navigator or outliner, whatever you want to refer to it as. It's called Navigator in Motion Builder. This is where our assets are. In this case, our asset would be this character that I imported. If I click on the little plus next to scene here, I should see things that are relevant to that character, like the Mixamo hips and some other Ready Player Me stuff that I'm not using right now. So we can click on things in Motion Builder like you would expect. If I click on the hips, I can select the hip joints. We're going to be selecting on the hips momentarily to start this process. You can also change your display type. If you go to display up top here, you can view in X-ray mode, which lets you see the joints through the mesh, which is what we have right now. You can see the joints through the character's skin. You can pick normal, which will hide the joints, or model only, which will hide the joints completely. You can also hide specific things should you want. You can cycle through these options with Control A. So that will just allow you to see things with or without the joints. This may seem kind of a basic thing to tell you, but it's really useful to switch between these different modes when you're retargeting. Make sure things are in the right spot. The other window here is the view window up in the top left. This will allow you to switch between the perspective view, which is what we have now, which is the 3D view, and orthographic views. Orthographic views are perspectiveless views, which are in all 3D programs. And this is useful for us to also do alignment with retargeting. So if I go to orthographic front, now I see this straight on without any sort of perspective. Go back to perspective view with view perspective. Shortcut is Control E. View, perspective producer. Another interesting menu to see is the schematic option here, which is Control W. This gives you a hierarchical layout of your model. In this case, my joint system. The hip bone's connected to the spine and the legs, and then the legs are connected to the feet and the toes. Should we have multiple models imported here, I could see lots of these hierarchies. This is also a useful way for you to quickly select things and delete them should you not want them. We don't need to delete anything right now, but we will momentarily. Hit Control E to go back to perspective view. Okay. So before I bring in some motion capture data, I'm going to set this character up to receive that data in a process that's called characterizing. In Motion Builder, down here in the resources window, if you click on the Asset Browser tab and then go to Characters, Templates, there's also some default characters in here too, if you wanted to mess around with them without taking time to import your own character. So you go to Asset Browser, Characters, Character, and we're going to grab onto this character with our left mouse button, hold onto it, and drag it over to the hips. You can drag it onto your character in the viewport, onto the hips, the hip bone, not the mesh, the hip bone. You can drag and drop it onto the hips there. You can drag and drop it onto the hips in the navigator. The choice is yours. When you let go, it's going to say characterize. You're going to click on the characterize button, which is blue for me when I'm hovered over it. When I zoom out, it disappears, so I have to do it over again. Characterize, you click characterize, and it's going to ask you, is this a biped or a quadruped? Is the character facing the positive Z axis? We need these things to be true for this to work. So what is the positive z-axis? This is the grid on the floor. Positive z is this way. See how the blue line, you can actually see in the little widget down here. Positive z is the blue line or the purple line pointed towards us. That's positive z. If I went around the back of the character and looked on the floor, here would be z negative. See, negative 100, negative 200. 99 times out of 100, this is already going to be good to go. So character, I have to do this again because I backed out of it. Characterize hips, characterize. Is this a biped? Are they facing the positive z-axis? Yes. This allows Motion Builder to auto-characterize your character. Should we have time, I'll show you a way to manually characterize your character. But fingers crossed, most of the time, this should work fine for you. So you click biped, boom, it's done. Doesn't seem like anything happened, but let me show you what did happen. What happened is this little window up top here in character controls, now in the character drop down, it now says character. That thing named character is my character right here in the main viewport. What we're eventually going to do here is we select the character in the character slot, we select the motion capture in the source slot, and when those are both selected, it syncs them together so that anything that the source does, the character does. We haven't gotten the motion capture imported yet, so we're not to that step. What I want to do is I'm going to rename the character something else, just because character is a little bit ambiguous. Down in the bottom left, actually not sure why I have two characters, so let me do this over again. I think it's because I had Mixamo or Motion Builder open already. Characterize, characterize, biped, good. Okay, I want you to go down to the navigator in the bottom left, click on characters, then you should see your character there. If you right click on the thing called character, you can rename that to whatever your heart desires. I'm going to rename mine just RPM for Ready Player Me. You can see when I rename that now in the top right, my character is called RPM. You know, this renaming thing, not a big deal unless you're doing maybe a lot of characters at the same time. But I just do it to show you. Huh? Questions so far? Question. What's that? You don't have it. You don't have the navigator. There's definitely a way to do so. Yep. Anybody else missing navigator? you delete not that it's really a problem, but it's confusing. So I would just bring Red Player character back in Blender. What all those blue circles are is their like shapes for the animation on the face. Yes, with Mixamo, download, T-Pose. All right, we're going to get this working and then we're going to take a break. Still recording. Okay, so I gave you a motion capture file. If you didn't get that or you came in late, this is the link for you to download that file, tinyurl.com/mocapclass2024 assets. This is a Google Drive folder that has the mocap file for you to use that I'm going to use. The only file you need from this folder is a bunch of stuff in here. Just the take FBX file. Just download that. I will be uploading a bunch more motion capture for you to use for your assignments. And this FBX file is a motion capture recording from our ballroom motion capture studio. So what we're doing now is exactly what you're going to be doing with your own stuff. All right, so we brought the character that we want to put the animation on into Motion Builder. Now we need to bring in the animation itself, okay? The animation itself is not connected to a model. So it's going to come in just with an animated skeleton. Then what we're going to do in Motion Builder is say everything that the motion capture skeleton does, I want this Ready Player Me skeleton to do. That's what retargeting is, okay? So let's go to File, Motion File Import, File, Motion File Import, and well, in the interest of consistency, I have all of them here, but I think I gave you the, is yours the .58 one, right? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to do that one too. So click Import, and you should see two other yellow skeletons on either side. If you click the play button or scrub the timeline here, you should see them start to do battle. Fun. This was done with two actors recorded at the same time. We could record multiple actors at the same time should you want to. For our purposes today, we're going to delete one of these in Motion Builder just so you know how to do that. So we're going to delete the one on the left. No offense to Lucas's old motion capture, but select. And then if you go to your navigator, it should be called Lucas_root. Right click on that. And when you right click, this is a little annoying. Actually, let me back up and show you something first. So when you look at any of this stuff, you see the plus button to the left of any of this. This allows you to expand that hierarchy one level. Every time I click the plus button, it expands one level. It is a real pain in the butt to click that button to expand the entire hierarchy. Madness. Think about that. The roots, the hips, the spine, the arm, the forearm, the hand, each finger, that's going to take a lot of time to do. So if you click on the root and then go to expand to selection or select branches, select branches is going to select everything. Or actually, no, don't expand them. Just keep it like this, and then when you right click on it without any expanded, it will just say expand branches, and that will expand everything. You won't get expand branches if you have anything expanded. So when you click expand branches, now it expands the entire hierarchy. And we don't even have to select every single one of those. Again, we can select the root, right click, and pick select branches, and it will select all of them. What we're trying to do is select everything so we can delete everything. So I'm going to take a pit stop for a second and look back at the schematic view. You don't have to do this, but just look. So now here, see I have the multiple skeletons, like a visual layout of the multiple skeletons. You can also select things that way, which maybe is a little bit more intuitive. A lot of different ways to do the same thing. So now with all of that selected, I'm going to right click on the root again and go to delete and confirm. Okay. And that gets rid of the one skeleton. Now the important stuff. Yep. All right, so next thing that we need to do is we need to do what's called zeroing out this skeleton over here. So see how it's faced not in the positive Z direction. Also, the T-pose is pretty good, but it's not perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the root for that, which happens to be called Yeezan root. I'm going to do the same thing, select it, expand branches, right click on it again, select branches, so I have all of it selected. So the whole thing's green, like this. And then I want you to right click on the little, I don't know what you would call this, the timeline slider button. Or my bad, not the timeline slider button. Right click on the root of the character that you're trying to zero out and go to zero rotation. So I right clicked on the root. I'm zeroing all the rotations of all the joints. Zero rotation. And when you do that, it should face positive Z. And also the T-pose looks a little bit more T-posed. So in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of gloss over this part right now. But this is where I could drag this over and really kind of try to match the joints from the character to the motion capture data. This is where I could go into an orthographic view with view, orthographic. This might be best just for you to watch rather than following along because I'm just showing right now. Orthographic front view. Now I can see any sort of disparity between the two skeletons. One is a little bit smaller than the other. It's not a huge deal. There is some difference in the shoulder joints that could be a problem. There is definitely a difference in how the thumb is managed here. So I might want to take these joints and change them before I go and sync them together. I'll show you how to do that later, but in the interest of time, we're just going to get past that. But see the difference in how this thumb is on these two things? This could be a problem, it could not be a problem. Ideally, when you're doing targeting, you want the two cells to match as closely as possible. At the end of the day, they just spend a ton of time. It's difference. But in a perfect world, we would make these two cells more similar right now, right here in motion. So when the thumb is in T pose, it's actually like this, not down here. Makes no good for us. I want to send you all on a break, so we're going to skip over that right now and just get these two skeletons synced. Another thing to remember is that this skeleton it's animated, right? So what I just did with that zeroing and everything, if I scrub my timeline, that all goes away. See, it's not zeroed out anymore. If I scrub the timeline. So be careful when you do that, that before you sync, you make sure everything's zeroed out again. So I have to go and zero mine out again because it's not rotated properly. Okay, now the moment of truth. We also need to characterize this skeleton. So again, I'm going to grab the hips, select the hips. And this Yeezan, that's just his name from when he recorded motion capture. It's just what we called him, motive, his name. I'm going to grab onto character. We're characterizing again, drag that over to the hips. Characterize, biped, boom. Good. If you were to scroll down in the navigator now you should have two characters, unless you went crazy and did it multiple times. I'm going to right click on the one that's called character now and rename that mocap, because that's the one I just did. And now, the real moment of truth, up in this menu right here, in the top right, I select the character and I select the source. If I click the drop down here, I can see both of my characters here that I've characterized, RPM and mocap. The character that I want to put the mocap on is my Ready Player Me character, the RPM. So that's what I want to select for the drop down for character. So the top drop down should be RPM. The bottom drop down, source, should be mocap. If you have multiple mocaps here, which you very easily can, you might have a list of these if you've characterized multiples. As soon as you click mocap, I'm going to click none again. As soon as you click mocap, you should see your character snap into position. And now, if you scrub the timeline, you should see that it moves with the motion capture data. This is where everyone oohs and ahs and claps at our successful retargeting. Looks a lot cooler with a model on it than it does just the skeleton. So here you can see the original motion capture skeleton in yellow and then the model's skeleton in white. And this animation is not that crazy. There is a lot of weirdness in the hands. This is sword fighting, so fingers are very important here. But it got a lot of the way there. The fall looks good. There's some cross-arm stuff that we might have to deal with. But we synced the animation, which is what we wanted. Remember, we have these different view modes with Control A where I can cycle between X-ray mode, which is seeing both skeletons through the mesh, non-X-ray mode, and then just the model itself. This was the group that we ordered the crash pads for after the fact because they really threw themselves around on the floor. There's this one attack that they do. You can see the person that falls, they actually bounce when they hit the ground. And you can see it in the motion capture data too. I don't think it's in this file, but in another file. Question? It's not essential that we move on top of each other. All that is just a visual way to see if they're, yeah, but you don't have to move them on top of each other. It's that's just help you visualize if they're doing the same thing. But sometimes you might have a character that you can see this later, but if you retargeted it wrong, you might see a character that has its arm up, and then the other character doesn't have its arm fully extended; it just has its arm down, like this, like it didn't go all the way up. And it's something obvious like that you can see side by side. But I like to drag them on top of each other just because you can really see if they're matching up then. Okay, so we have a character that has been synced with custom motion capture. The next step would be for us to, well, not right now, but typically what we would want to do from here is we want to go in and clean anything up, any problems. We would want to fix hands. We would want to fix fingers, animate fingers, that sort of stuff. Uh, we are just going to go straight into Unreal so that you can get the base pipeline understood. And then we're going to circle back and do the more complicated stuff after we do that. For your assignment for next week, I'm not expecting you to do fingers or fix glitches or anything like that. You're just going to kind of have to live with that stuff for right now. I would like to talk about it this week, but that's a little bit more advanced. Okay, so don't freak out. Don't feel the pressure to do that. If you want to, you can, and if you're comfortable with doing that, you can. But we're just going to go straight into Unreal right now. But we're going to take a break first before we do that. All right. So let's take a break. Let's come back at 12:15, and we'll continue. If you got to this part, though, good job. It's a lot of steps. You see the difference between separation or so the separation doesn't really matter. It's just eventually you to you could have still work. It just helps visualize differences. Good. And so the skeleton of the yellow one, that's just based on the size of the person. Smaller, bigger, bigger. That's reflected here by the FBX file that has this is actually this. So this is how long this so the process of retargeting is for us to bring that into the mind. So you can take these joints, but that's you don't see problems. But it's that's the point. So we have those tracks. Go in. It depends on the model. Every model is different. You think it's a problem. It can take very specific see all the time video games. They're sit down or just go through the chair. It's actually make them good. None of the time, the player just accept that. It's a handshake. Close enough, you know. When the person picks up the thing in the game, actually picking up, a lot of work goes into actually making it look good. Right? But ultimately depends on your so that hand going into the body, absolutely that's something. This so this a little bit it's something you might want to do. But just looking at this. Chin starts. So the way that we fix this problem is essentially put a model. But it might look good there. Then you go 100 frames later, that arm's a little bit too far out, you know? So we'll look at that stuff. Well, the team. there was a little bit of stuff. In a perfect world, if you in a perfect world you want the joints. So the hips of the mocap and the hips of the character. Although the one that was at the same time. Remember there was like the shoulders, the one was down a little bit, the one was really straight, the thumb was down, the other one. So those discrepancies can cause problems later. Whether it actually is a problem or not. Really say and it might not be a problem at all. But when before we do the syncing, as soon as we put these two things together, they snap together. So that dragging that top allows us to see the difference. Oh, let's keep that on. And if we sync when the thumbs down, we're saying that the thumb down on this one is the same thing as the thumb with this for the motion. Yeah. Nobody did it. I didn't tell anybody to do it. But it's something that we can look at in the future. Disappeared. Oh no. Hope they're okay. So, same problem. So I'll delete the goats, delete the bees in character. See it, see it, see it, see it. So the problem was is that we were characterizing the group of hits. So select hits and drag it onto hits. Oof. So I put a link in our Discord that'll be useful to you later. Mocap test data. It's a mocap test data folder here. And there's a bunch of stuff in here from a couple different projects from another semester. You are welcome to explore any of this animation. You really kind of need to look at it to see what you got too. So opening up the files in Motion Builder and just exploring the animation and seeing what it looks like. I will make a note of this now. Inside of these folders, say for instance here, they're named kind of what they are, but you really need to look at them to see if it's animation that you even want. Also notice that there are TAK files and FBX files. The TAK files are Motion Builder file, or not Motion Builder, they are Motive files. You are not using the TAK files, you're using the FBXs, okay? We're using the FBX today. TAK file, you could reopen it up in Motive, but we haven't talked about how to do that yet. So don't use the TAK file. I know somebody's going to ask about it, so I'm just going to make a note here real quick. All right, any questions before we jump back into it? Okay, so we synced our mocap and our character, but now we need to get it out into Unreal. Now, we haven't cleaned it up. We haven't dealt with any sort of proportional differences or anything like that. But I will say that generally, I think it looks okay. So our next step, after we have these synced here, our next step after we have these synced here is that we need to bake the keyframes to a skeleton, essentially. When we import animations into Unreal, it wants a keyframe on every single frame of animation data. Right now, we just have Motion Builder making the connection between our model and our mocap data. We need to take that data and actually bake it into our character's skeleton. So it's pretty simple to do that. After you're happy with everything, you can click on the, actually first, before we do this, let's go to File, Save As. It's a really good idea to save in Motion Builder a lot because you can't really undo things. So I'm going to just call this just MB for Motion Builder. So I don't want you to make your skeleton, and then when we go back to the file, you won't be able to use it anymore. Okay? So after we've synced things together and we're happy with it, you click on the blue button in the top right. What's that? I am. Thank you. Click on the blue button in the top right and go down to Bake, Plot to Skeleton. Also notice below that says Bake Plot to Control Rig. It's the word that I've mentioned a couple times today. We'll see how much time we have, but baking to Control Rig will allow us to clean up things, fix any sort of clipping issues with arms going through bodies, that sort of stuff. It allows us to basically animate on top of an animation to fix existing problems and refine animation, add finger animation when there is none, things like that. Right now, we are baking plot to skeleton. To get animation to Unreal, we need to bake plot to skeleton, always. So bake plot to skeleton. Depending on how long your animation is, it will run through that, and then it should be done. Now, this is a longest animation, so I'm actually going to maybe clip it down at frame 750-ish. And here, I'm going to drag my timeline to like 750 area, and then right-click and go to Time, Set End. Right-click on the timeline indicator, Time, Set End. I'm just clipping off all of the extra animation. You don't have to do this, it's just things will import faster. We're not importing a bunch of extra animation. Stuff that we don't really need. Okay, now I can go to File, Export. Or actually, File, Save As. And I'm going to call this one just RPM Unreal. Maybe I'll call it Unreal Raw because it hasn't really been refined. And save. Now there are two animations in mine. It might be different from you. When you click save, this will pop up. Figure the Mixamo animation is probably the T-pose, and then the take animation is the actual sword fighting stuff. I'm going to click save. And hooray, we've created a new FBX file that I'm now going to jump over to Unreal to do. If you want to open up Unreal. We're going to do this process all over again much more quickly, just so you can lock it down in a second. But now it's time to import our model into Unreal. So I just created a new folder to dump all these assets into. Import, where did I save it? There. Okay. So this is a brand new skeleton that we're importing. So the skeleton option should be blank. Something that everybody always forgets. Teacher, my animations, my thing's not moving. Make sure you check the import animations box. It should be checked by default, but there's always a couple people this happens to. And click import. Depending on how long your animation is, this could take a little bit of time. The one that you baked to skeleton. Click it on. Okay. And after you do that, should see that the animation is imported. So remember, skeletal mesh is the pink ones, the animations are the green ones. Like I said, there was the animation that's just the T-pose too. And then there's the animation of the sword fight itself as well. If I double clicked on that one, I should see what I saw in Motion Builder. Except now I'm in Unreal. Now yours might not have textures when you import it into Unreal, especially if it's a different character. If you're working with the same Unreal project and the same Ready Player Me character like I am, as last week, uh, it probably has textures on it. Yours does not have textures on it. Remember how last week we imported the GLB file from Ready Player Me directly into Unreal to get the materials? You're going to have to go ahead and do that if you don't have textures and materials. And then you're going to have to reassign them manually, like we looked at last week. If you forget how to reassign them manually, or you can open up the skeletal mesh in Unreal, and then over in the asset details, you have the list of all of the material slots. There's a slot for the eyes and the skin. What order these should be in really depends on your character and where it's coming from. Sometimes you have to guess. But a little bit better than guessing is using these little toggles right here on the different material slots. You can highlight or isolate to narrow down what the thing is that you're actually, what material you should put on this part of the body. You can highlight it or isolate it. Because if you just see a big list of 12 of these things, it can be a little confusing about what goes where. And now it just becomes an assignment just like last week. Put the animation into Unreal, build a little world around it, put the animation on sequencer so that it plays, do a little camera movement, make it a little fun, record it out. Same thing, except now it's with custom motion capture using Motion Builder. So we do have a class later in the semester, much later in the semester, that's specifically about data cleanup and control rigs. But we might just briefly talk about control rigs today after everybody's able to get this. We'll see. To get the textures, use the GLB file directly from Ready Player Me. If you did the GLB first, when you imported the one from Motion Builder, it should automatically import because it's looking for those files, but not doing it the GLB second. The reason it worked for me is because it's the same character from last week, and I already had those files in Unreal. Just a little refresher about the GLB thing, importing into Unreal. So if you don't have textures, this is how you're going to get them. So we're going to go to import and find the original GLB file from when we first started this, exporting from Ready Player Me. Now, there's a lot of stuff in here we don't need, so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to suggest that you don't import. We can uncheck import skeletal meshes, and we can uncheck import animations, because all we want is the textures and the materials, right? You can also uncheck import static meshes too. There shouldn't be any static meshes, but I don't know, maybe if you forgot to delete the icosphere, that would be a static mesh possibly. So I unchecked skeletal meshes, I unchecked import animations, I unchecked import skeletal meshes. I unchecked those because I don't need them and it's just going to be confusing. But what I did, this should be selected by default, but I left import textures selected. So when I import this now, all I get is the textures and it makes the materials, and then they plop right here. And then I can go assign them manually into my skeletal mesh material slots. Forgot to put the texture on his teeth, even though you can't see his teeth. Question. Little things. It's really like hurts, yes. Um, oh. One thing for everybody to note, kind of glossed over this. When you characterize, it's going to happen for all of our motion capture data. So that file that I gave you had the roots, and then you clicked into it, and then it had the hips. We want to characterize the hips always. We don't want to characterize the root. A couple people characterized the roots, and then it didn't work. So just make sure we're characterizing hips always. There was supposed to be combined text social. So so fun. So what I would do is first. Delete all of this Unreal. Import the GLB first. Uncheck animation function, scale to mesh, check static mesh, just so it gives you material and textures. Then import your motion builder file, and we'll have it applied to it already. Save it. Also save that. Okay, let's import the GLB file first. So, slow down. Uncheck import static meshes. Uncheck import static meshes. Down. Uncheck import animations. Scroll down. Materials. Good. And import the motion builder file. No, because it's new, so we're creating stuff.
For the GLB file.
You enjoyed it. All right, let's do it. Let's import the GLB first. animations. We don't want to import any dimensions or anything. We just want to do it. Sum all up for us. So now when we import our motion builder file, it's looking for things that are named things, so we'll automatically apply them. So enjoy doing that manually. I've had to do it manually for like a mesh that had 100 material slots before. It was my suggestion going forward, using Ready Player Me characters, would be to import the GLB file directly into Unreal before you import the motion builder file, because it's going to create the textures and materials and set all that up for you. When you import that GLB, and it will pop up a menu like I've showed already, but I'll show it again. Just make a new folder. It's going to ask you, what do you want to import? We don't need static meshes, uncheck that. We don't need skeletal meshes, uncheck that. We don't need animations, uncheck that. It's not going to break anything if you don't uncheck those. It's just a little confusing because then you're going to have multiple skeletal meshes in the folder with multiple animations. We need to have import textures checked. Then you click import and it will import all of your textures into Unreal. Then when you import your motion builder file into the same folder, it's looking for these textures and materials. So we'll set all that stuff up for you already. It will have everything all applied in their proper material slots, like I have here. Okay. It's just a really annoying quirk with Ready Player Me. I think it's been a problem for the last year. I think it just has to do with how they name their textures. There's base color .001 and there's base color 01, and Unreal does not like that. And neither is Mixamo. You can see when we uploaded it to Mixamo, something breaks between Blender and the exporting of the FBX file. But this is the most fail-safe way to do things. Believe me, this is much less painful than the old way that I used to have people do things, which was manually exporting textures from Blender one at a time, which is not fun. This is pretty easy, actually, if you uncheck the right boxes and do things in the right order. Okay, questions? So now I have some motion capture animation in Unreal. Oh, somebody was asking about root motion earlier. This is going to look really weird. So this this character is walking around a 3D space, right? It's not staying in one spot, swinging his sword around. In the animation window in Unreal, if I check the toggle root motion, it's going to lock his hips to 000 while keeping all the other joint motion happening. But it looks weird because in reality, to do these poses, his hips are actually moving up and down to get in position. Now it looks really strange. It looks like he's swimming in the air or something like that. Root motion. Okay, now we could build a world around this if we were ready to. You know, always remember to save everything. You know, I'm not going to go over putting this back into sequencer or any of that stuff again. It's just like last class. But now I have the animation in Unreal. I could connect a mesh to his hands if I wanted to. Could do something like, I don't have a 3D model of a sword handy right now. Should have thought about this. But if I made a sword, just like a stick. I'm doing this live right now, so I'm gonna get myself into trouble. Where's this at? Here. The sword. Okay. If I made a sword and then I right clicked on this, oh, actually, you have to make it movable first. See, mobility, static, stationary, movable. We talked briefly about that 2 weeks ago. And I make the mesh movable. And if I right click on my cube, which is a sword, maybe I'll just rename this sword real quick. Edit sword. Right click, go to attach to. What is my character called? Ready Player Me. Yeah, that looks like the right mesh. Ready Player Me. Right click, attach to Ready Player Me. Since it's a skeletal mesh, it's not going to ask me which joint I want to attach it to. I'm doing this live, so I'm not really sure what the best one would be, but it makes most sense to have it in the hand. I'm left-handed, so I put it in the left hand. Now if I play this animation, the sword is attached to the left hand, but it's not centered. Where did it disappear to? It's through the floor right now. What I forgot to do was actually put it in the left hand before clicking play. Where's it at? Where's the sword? There we go. Oh my goodness. There we go. If you just zero everything out, it will pop right into the hand because it's attached to the hand. Now I just need to rotate it in place to make it aligned correctly. It's attached to the hand joint. Need to offset it a little bit to put it in the fingers. I think that's good enough for right now. It's a little thick, but maybe I'll just take this down a little bit. 0.03 and 0.03. All right, let's see what happens now. It's like I put the sword in the non-sword hand. But you get the idea. Should have put it in the right hand. See, this world's totally anti-left-handed people. Oops. That's pretty much the process. And this is the process that you'll be doing till the end of class this semester. Custom motion capture recording, put it on a character. It doesn't have to be a Ready Player Me character. Take it into Motion Builder, apply the motion capture, make the skeleton, bring it into Unreal. Profit. Questions? Maybe I'll just run through the whole darn thing while everybody watches, just cleanly without stopping. So it'd be a nice, clean recording for everybody. All right. Maybe we'll see if we can find a sword fighting character too. I think there's a couple on Mixamo. Maybe we'll use a Mixamo model then instead of Ready Player Me. All right, let's start over. Mixamo, let's see what sort of sword fighting character we have. No sword. Claws, 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 claws. There's got to be a sword fighting character on here. Doing this live, so. Oh, there she is. Very crazy. What is this? Refresh. All right, this Viking lady here. She has a sword at least. In her right hand, of course. Let's just use her. She's in a T-pose. That's great. Same thing. We just download. T-pose. Download. This character's name happens to be Maria. So I'm going to say Maria Mixamo. Feb 23rd, I guess. Cool. Correct. All right, gonna go over to Motion Builder, start a new file, import Maria, open. She came over with all of her textures, awesome. Let's characterize her hips. So characterizing the hips, Mixamo hips, drag character over from the right side, biped. I'm going to go to characters and just rename her from character to Maria. Now I'm going to go to File, Motion File Import. I'm going to try a different file this time. See what we got. Import. I think it's the same idea sword fighting wise. Maybe we'll keep the big. I like the big chop, the sword, right? Right here. Ah, yeah, we're gonna keep that. That's what we want. So whose character is that? Is that? Yeah, that's this character. So I'm gonna delete the character on the right. Select all branches. Right click on it. Select all branches. We're gonna get rid of the using one. Delete, right click, delete, confirm. Okay, got rid of that. So we're going to be using the Lucas one now, that big jump. So remember, we want to characterize not the root, but the hips. Motive exported FBX files are going to give us the root, which is not a bad thing. You just need to make sure that you're characterizing the hips, not the root. So hips. Drag character over from the asset browser on the hips, characterize, biped, good. And I'll rename that mocap. In the character section, I just right-clicked, rename. And now we're going to select Lucas, and I'm going to right-click, select branches, right-click on root, 0, 0 rotation. Oops. Just rotation, just rotation. 0 rotation, and connect them together. Oops, put the mocap there. Remember, we want Maria to be on top. She's the character, and then the source is the mocap. Whoops. Uh-oh, see, this is what happens when, see the disparity? The one has Z facing forwards, and the other one does not. That's because I characterized the mocap when it wasn't facing Z forwards. So zero it out before you characterize it, because now Maria, the left side of Maria's body is now the front of the motion capture's face, right? This is how you really break a rig right here. This looks pretty fun, actually. What's the problem here? So the left side of her body is now the front of her, and that's the result. All right, let's undo that. Undo. That was my bad. Or maybe I did it on purpose. Okay. Start it over. We characterized Maria already. We need to characterize the motion capture data, the Lucas. Right click on Lucas root, select branches, right click on Lucas root, zero rotation. Now it's front facing Z. Awesome. Now I can select the hips. As long as I don't scrub the timeline, this will stay front facing Z. If I scrub the timeline, now it undoes that zeroing, and I have to do it again. Select branches, right click, zero, rotation. Good. Now I select the hips, go over to the right side, bottom right, character, drag character onto the hips, characterize, biped, boom. Now I'm going to rename this again to mocap. You don't have to rename it, but I'm just doing it for clarity. All right, good. So now I will go up to the character controls. I'll put Maria in the character slot. In source, I'll put mocap. Maria jumps to the mocap data. Now the moment of truth. Let's see some sword fighting. I want to see that big jump. You can also slow down the speed too in Motion Builder with the speed toggle. Oh yeah. Big jump. So it's not too bad. It's a good starting spot. So I'm going to export this now by baking it to the skeleton. I'm going to export to, what frame is this? 854. So you can right click on the timeline indicator there, time, set end. I'm also going to set my beginning because I don't need the whole thing. It will start right there, right click, time, set start. So now my animation is just the jump. Ooh. All right, now I'm going to export this. That looks pretty good. Just need to maybe make the sword go in the hands a little bit better. Close the fingers around it, that sort of stuff. Now we need to bake it to skeleton for Unreal. This is where I would save. I always like to save before I bake it to skeleton. So I'm going to save as Maria, call this MB, Motion Builder. And then bake skeleton. So blue button, bake plot to skeleton. Blue button, bake plot, bake to skeleton. Finish this really quick. And then save as. Call this one Unreal. Save as. Save. Go over to Unreal. Create a new folder. Maria. Import Maria Unreal. Import skeletal mesh. Import mesh. Yes. Skeleton. There's no skeleton. I haven't imported her before. Import animations. Remember to check this. We already got one person that forgot this today. Don't let the next one be you. Import animations. Yes, import textures. For some reason that's not clicked. Yes. Oh, do not create materials is clicked too. I do want to create materials. Create materials and import textures. Yes. Import. All right. Looks like we got it here. Just running around in Unreal now. That leg pull out is a little weird there. It's not cleaned up at all, but I'm not expecting you to clean anything up at this point. So now we could do something with it in Unreal. Ugh. Dead. Oops. Yeah. And this is where you start to build your world and tell your story and finesse those animations together and all that other stuff. Question. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah, I'm recording. You know, there's been many times where class would end and I would be like, damn it, didn't click record. So that I just do a speed run recording at the end. Yes, recording. 2 whole hours of glorious zooming in and out on different software, telling you to animate warrior ladies and dudes in ski masks. This is what you signed up for. Questions? Question. We haven't learned how to do that. So I might just erase that from the syllabus. That's a good question, though. I was planning on showing you how to do that. Um, I'm not comfortable with. I could show it to you, but I'm not comfortable with having you do that for an assignment because I don't want to put that on you. Just yeah, just what we did just now. Yeah. What? Make it pretty. Make it pretty. Make some sort of rhyme or reason why you're doing what you're doing. He's talking about on the syllabus. On the syllabus, I say to using Motion Builder retarget and then using Unreal to retarget. You can do retargeting in Unreal. It's fine, but it's only really useful if you have a character already in Unreal that you want to retarget from. The reason is that what we just did was we retargeted a model using motion capture data. That motion capture data is from Motive, exactly like what you're going to record eventually. It didn't have a mesh attached to it, right? So there was no character, no body attached to that skeleton. In Unreal, you cannot just import skeletons without attaching them to a mesh. It just won't let you do it. So we actually can't do it. There's a really dumb way to work around that. You could attach a cube or a sphere to the skeleton just to brute force import it into Unreal. Well, it's kind of dumb, right? Just to have you be able to do the retargeting in Unreal, which is much less robust than doing it in Motion Builder, and honestly, much less professional than doing it in Motion Builder. I could still show you though, but I'm gonna strike that from the syllabus. Maybe I'll just strike it right now. How do I do strike through? Somebody help me out. Just, I don't want to delete it because I still like it there. Oh, there it is. Duh. Nobody wants to tell me. They just want to watch me fail. Huh? See how it is. Yeah, so don't worry about that part. We might as well just go over this while we're here. Because the rest, what I show you in Unreal will kind of be just show and tell. So for your assignment next week, you are to essentially do what you did last week, except this time you're introducing Motion Builder into the mix, like what we did in our demo today. Okay? Ready Player Me character, Mixamo character. I don't really care where you get the character from. Okay? Take the character, auto rig it in Mixamo, bring that into Motion Builder, characterize it, bring in the motion capture data. I've given you a bunch of motion capture data in all this test motion capture data, which is linked right here, test motion capture data. You are going to have to go through here and find something that you like. Okay? How do you do that? You open up the FBX files one at a time in Motion Builder and see if it's something that you like. It's a lot of stuff here. Dora's Lost Explorers has a lot of different takes. What the hell does escaping mean? You're going to have to find out. So much fun. What does arrival mean? Oh, I don't know. Death. I might have these, might actually have, this is the final project, so I don't think I have the projects that motion capture data is from anymore. I'll find the sword fighting one and dig it up and post it to Discord so you could see using that sword fighting motion capture so you can see where they ended up. So yeah, you'll have to go through this test motion capture data and find something that you like. Find a clip that you like. You can trim it down. You could put multiple clips together if you wanted to. Whatever you want. Some teams recorded really long takes like that sword fighting. Some recorded more isolated takes like, well, this is not very descriptive. Alien and Villager. Here's some more descriptive takes like petting, touching particles, walking around in wonder, tree hide, stuff like that. DJ move, chill dance, excited dance. You can go check these out. And again, don't use the TAK files, use the FBX files. Okay? And then go ahead and make a post about that just like you've been doing. I would like you to also read that motive skeleton tracking documentation. So that's what we'll be looking at next week, setting up skeleton tracking in motive in the ballrooms. Also, most importantly, I want you to form small groups of 3 to 4 people, like I said at the beginning of class. Again, these groups have nothing to do with the final projects. These groups are just going to be your motion capture recording groups for the next 2 classes. This is just so we can be more efficient, and each group will have one person recording motion capture, one person suited up. Other people in the group can be directing, operating the desktop computer down there, hitting the record button, saving the files, doing that sort of stuff. Uh, but one person will be in the suit. Okay, we only have so many suits. There's only so much time. Uh, that's just how it's going to be. We will probably have 2 recording sessions going on simultaneously, so I think we'll have a good bit of time to actually record stuff. What should you record? Well, that's up to you, folks. You will be taking this recording and again putting it into a virtual world that you make. Think of this as your midterm assignment almost. In 2 weeks, we will be presenting these projects, the body and live capture videos together. Next week, we are doing body capture. And then the week after that, we are going to do live capture. They're both body capture. It's just the one is not live. Like we didn't do live today. We recorded motion capture to a file and then we did something with it. The live one, we're going to be recording in Unreal right then and there. So you'll need to come with your Unreal worlds kind of built to class because we record that motion directly into the world. You can always go back and move things around and swap stuff out. But the more finished your world is, the better for that class. For next week, just show up with some vague idea of motion that you want to record with your group and some vague idea of a world that you want that to happen in. You know, the more prepared that you are and the more you know what you want to make, you're going to be able to make something better. You show up to class and you're like, oh, I don't know what we want to record. We don't know what our world is going to make. Your animation is probably going to suck because you're going to be figuring it out on the fly. Okay? So form a group, and I'll leave a little bit of time today to do this in class. Form a group and just talk about what you want to make and who's going to be suited up and who wants to do the computer stuff and who wants to direct. Obviously, you can swap around, but just have some idea of what you want to do. And this will be our kind of first formal real production. But no pressure. This is just our first time. So we're going to be figuring it out live in the studio. All right? So no pressure. It'll be fun, I promise. And you get to wear the suit. Person wearing the suit, come prepared to put your hair up, put a little beanie on for the motion capture, to wear spandex suits. Don't wear crazy shoes. Don't wear crazy bulky clothes. You know, stuff like that. Like a t-shirt and tight pants is fine. Sure. Sorts of the hand. I'll show you how to do that. How about I open up Maya and get this sword out of this character's hand. So I have an actual sword. Or you know what? I already have Blender open. Yeah, I could do it from Blender. Don't save. So the question was, how do I get the sword in the character's hand? If you don't have a character that has a sword, then you need to do that, right? So I'm going to, first I'm just going to get a sword. I'm going to try to steal it from Sword Viking Lady. Maria. Sorry, Maria's her name. But you know what? Blender scares me, so I'm actually just going to use my imports. You know, if you all want the sword, I'll save the sword as a file too that you can then use if that's useful. Computer, user, rater, documents. Why is this not showing? Documents. She's importing, supposedly. Huge Maria. Delete. Delete. Sword. All this stuff is locked for some reason. Unlock. Center pivot. Gigantic sword. Actually, I think the pivot of the sword, let's put it right here. Remember, the pivot in Unreal is where it's located at 0, 0, 0 on the grid in your 3D program. It's not a 0, 0, 0. Sword. Close enough. It's beautiful. All right. Let's export the sword. Now upload this so you can have a lovely sword to cherish. Shit, where did I save it to? Oh, documents, just on the main documents. Profile, sword. Stat mesh sword. There we go. Cool, there's your sword. But how do we do it in Unreal? That was the real question. Let's get this guy standing back up. Or you know what? I'll just have. Okay, I need. No, that's just the beginning of the animation. It is easier. I'm using the sword fighting. See? This it's just it starts with the T-pose. So import. Where's that sword? Static mesh sword. It's not a skeleton mesh. So import textures. Yes. Import. Sword. It's a nice looking sword. Okay. Drag sword into world. Put sword in hand. You will have to refine it a little bit. Turn off snapping so I can actually put it in the hand. Okay, then we need to attach it to the right hand joint. In order to, if I right click on it and go to attach to, see it doesn't list any of the skeletal meshes. The reason for that is because you need to actually make it a movable mesh. So clicking on the sword, I then go to mobility and set this to movable instead of static. Now when I right click on the sword, right click on the static mesh sword, I go to attach to, and I get a list of a bunch of stuff that I can attach it to. I assume it's this bottom one because the one in the middle there already has a sword attached to it, which I think is just that block. So this is where it's useful to name things. So I'm going to attach it to that bottom one, RPM underscore Unreal Raw underscore Feb 23rd, because I think that's my new one. Attach to that. When you click that, it's going to ask you what joint do you want to attach it to. I'm going to pick hand, right hand, and now it should be attached. If it jumps somewhere, go ahead and drag the sword back in place. You can see that it parented up top here. It's now underneath the skeletal mesh for that animation. So now if I was to play this or play it on a timeline or something, my guy here has a sword in his hand and he just chopped his head off. The sword size was really not accounted for in terms of motion capture. So if you do a motion capture, your character is going to have this huge bastard of a sword. You better account for that in your performance, because if you're doing like a little dinky rapier or something in your performance, and you're like moving it around your head, you're going to decapitate yourself. Your sword's going to go through your head when you put it on the actual character. So your performance should match what your character is going to be. If your character is a big badass in motion capture, you better perform like a badass in the ballroom, right? The motion capture is 1-to-1. Does that help, Lamar? Cool. All right. So record, build a world, put the animation in Unreal, render it out as a video, just like last week. Do you have a question? Just any sort of errors or glitches, either work around them or ignore them. Okay? Embrace them, make them funny in some way, or just ignore them. We haven't looked at cleaning up motion capture yet. I haven't showed you control rigs to do things like fingers or fix when the sword goes through the head. You're welcome to explore those things, but I have no expectation for you to have polished motion capture right now. We're just in the beginning steps. All right. So that's all I have for you today. We have a little bit of time left if you want to start speed dating for a group, pairing up. 3 to 4 people, I think, is a good amount. Any more than that, there's some people that feel left out. Any less than that, and we might have just too much groups to record motion capture. Okay. So, yeah, form a group. Let me know if you have any questions or problems. Form a group and start thinking about what it is that you want to record next week and where you